Welcome. You're listening to Detective Duo, bringing you tales from the golden age of mystery, adventures in the spirit of Tommy and Tuppence Beresford. Tap subscribe to stay with us and share where in the world you're listening from. Tommy Beresford was wrestling with a desk drawer when the universe, with its usual mischief, decided to interfere. The drawer, having tolerated years of paperwork, receipts, and the occasional emergency biscuit tin, had finally rebelled. Tommy tugged. The drawer shuddered, squeaked in protest, and refused to move another inch. "I maintain," he muttered, bracing a shoulder against the mahogany, "that this desk possesses a moral character, and a poor one at that." "You're arguing with inanimate furniture again, aren't you?" came Tuppence's voice from behind him. She had only stepped out for 5 minutes, to buy ink, and returned to find her husband in pitched battle with office equipment. Tommy straightened, affecting nonchalance. "Merely observing that this particular desk is uncooperative. It's uncooperative because you insisted on moving it without me." Tuppence hung her handbag on a chair and surveyed the chaos with affectionate disdain. Papers lay strewn on the carpet like fallen snowdrifts, an open toolbox sat atop the typewriter, and the desk itself had been dragged a full foot from its usual wall. "Tuppence, my dear," Tommy replied with dignity, "I am perfectly capable of shifting a desk." "You're capable of shifting it," she said, "but not of deciding where it should go." He opened his mouth to retort, but was spared the effort by a sharp, hurried knock at the door. It wasn't the tentative tap of a potential client, nor the bold rap of a salesman. It was the sort of knock delivered by someone who had run 3 streets and wasn't sure if they were being followed. Tuppence arched an eyebrow. "That," she murmured, "is interesting." Tommy crossed the room and opened the door. A young man, no more than 25, stood on the threshold. His face was pale, earnest, and damp with the sheen of someone who had been walking briskly for more than comfort allowed. His hair stuck slightly to his forehead, and his breath came in thin, uneven pulls, as though he'd only recently stopped running. "Mr. Beresford?" he asked, though he looked directly at Tommy and not Tuppence. "Yes, indeed. Do come in." Tommy stepped aside. The young man hesitated before crossing the doorway, like someone performing a task he had rehearsed but dreaded. "I'm Edwin Price," he said, clasping his hands together. This isn't a professional call." "Most of our interesting calls aren't," Tuppence said, offering him a seat and moving a stack of newspapers to the floor. "Sit down, Mr. Price, and breathe. You look as if you've escaped from a pack of ravenous examiners." Edwin gave a weak smile but didn't sit. "I'm not here to hire you. I'm here to deliver something. A message. It's more personal than anything else." Tommy and Tuppence exchanged a glance. That look, half curiosity, half mild concern, was the unspoken language of their marriage. "Well," Tommy said easily, "you've come to the right pair for anything personal or peculiar." Edwin swallowed. "I promised someone I'd come to you when the time was right. I'm not entirely convinced the time is right yet, but I'm frightened it may soon be too late." Tuppence folded her arms. Promises delivered through near panic rarely suggest pleasant origins. Edwin nodded, still standing, still twisting his fingers. "I need to ask you something, Mr. Beresford. Before I say anything else, it sounds absurd, but it matters, truly." Tommy's voice softened. "Go on." "Do you—" Edwin hesitated, his breath hitching. "Do you still believe what you believed when you were 17? For a moment, the office seemed to exhale all at once. The question, bizarre though it was, hit Tommy like a pebble tossed into deep water, small, but with ripples spreading outward. He stared at Edwin. "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean." "You do," Edwin insisted, voice trembling. "Or you used to. I just need to know if you still believe it." Tuppence stepped closer to Tommy, as if she sensed a shadow he himself had not yet recognized. "What exactly did he believe at 17? She asked gently. Edwin shook his head. "I can't explain yet. I shouldn't even ask, but I had to. It's related to the promise I made." Tommy opened his mouth, searching for an answer, but found none. His mind rummaged through years long buried, school uniforms, half-forgotten quarrels, boyish certainties, but nothing came into focus. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "Perhaps I used to. Perhaps I don't anymore. Youth can be a very confused country." Edwin pressed his lips together, as though bracing himself for disappointment. "I hoped you'd remember, but maybe it's better you don't." He turned slightly, glancing out the window, the quick, frightened glance of someone accustomed to danger, his face drained of colour. "They've found me," he whispered. "Who?" Tuppence demanded. Edwin didn't answer. Instead, he fumbled in his coat, produced a sealed envelope and thrust it into Tommy's hands. "Don't open it now. Just keep it and be careful. And please." Before they could protest, he darted toward the door. "Mr. Price," Tommy called, but Edwin had already fled down the staircase, footsteps vanishing rapidly into the sounds of midday Bloomsbury. Carriages rattling, children shouting, vendors calling, life overrunning mystery. Tommy closed the door slowly, the envelope still in his hand. It felt oddly warm, as though Edwin's panic had seeped into the paper. "Well," Tuppence said after a moment, "that was either the prelude to adventure or the world's most confusing delivery service." Tommy tore the seal. Inside lay a single sheet of paper with a single typed line. "You were lied to, and someone paid dearly for it." Silence pooled in the room. Tuppence took the paper from his hand and examined it. "This isn't a joke." "No," Tommy murmured, sinking into the nearest chair. "It certainly isn't." And then Tuppence stiffened. "Tommy," she said quietly, "smell the envelope." He held it to his nose. Furniture polish. A faint, unmistakable scent of wax and citrus, as though it had been stored in a cupboard beside cleaning supplies. "Odd place for a message," Tommy said. "Odd?" Tuppence's eyes sharpened with instinctive clarity. "No, my dear, not odd, intentional. A scent that doesn't belong always means someone wanted it to." She folded the envelope carefully. "That young man wasn't lying," she said. "He was terrified." Tommy nodded slowly. A cold thread of truth ran through him, though its shape was not yet known. Whatever he had believed at 17, whatever lie had been told, had now come knocking at lunchtime, and it seemed it wasn't finished with him yet. Tommy Beresford had been staring at the envelope for so long that the afternoon shadows had quietly crept across the office carpet without his noticing. Tuppence noticed, of course. She noticed everything, especially when her husband was thinking too hard for his own peace of mind. She slid a chair beside him. "Well," she asked, "what did you believe at 17? Tommy rubbed his forehead as though trying to erase a memory etched there. "I wish you wouldn't put it like that. It sounds as though I belonged to some eccentric cult." "I rather think you did," Tuppence said. "It was called boyhood. Now talk." He exhaled slowly. "It's about St. Dunstan's, my old school. Something that happened, something that went very wrong." Tuppence folded her hands, waiting without pressure. It was a specialty of hers, the kind of silence that coaxed truth like steam rising from a kettle. "There was a boy," Tommy said at last. "Harlan Wade. Brilliant. Strange. The sort who read more than he spoke. People whispered that he came from difficult circumstances, though the headmaster insisted his scholarship was impeccable. One day, he disappeared." "Disappeared," Tuppence echoed. "Vanished entirely. The school called it withdrawing due to family reasons, but every boy in the dormitory knew it was nonsense. A rumour spread instead, an ugly one, that he'd been caught stealing from the scholarship trust funds." Tuppence's brow narrowed. "And what did you believe?" Tommy stared at the paper in his hands, that cold little message delivered by Edwin Price. "You were lied to, and someone paid dearly for it." "I believed the rumour," he said softly. "Or at least, I didn't question it." "And your part?" Tuppence's tone had softened too, losing all trace of teasing. Tommy's throat tightened. "I repeated something I overheard, just once. A teacher mentioned missing funds, and I was young and careless. The next day, everyone was saying Harlan had been caught red-handed, that I'd overheard the headmaster himself. The whole mess exploded from there." "Did you betray him intentionally?" Tuppence asked. "No, truly no. I didn't even know I was spreading anything serious. But the damage was done. Harlan's reputation, any hope he had, possibly even his future, gone. And now Edwin suggests the lie wasn't his, but mine." Tuppence tapped her fingers lightly on the desk. If the rumour wasn't true, someone benefited from it, and they counted on teenage Tommy to be a reliable messenger. "That's the worst of it," Tommy admitted. I played right into it. Well, Tuppence said briskly, standing up, there's only one sensible thing to do in these situations. Hide? Tommy suggested. No, visit the scene of the crime. Come along, darling, you're taking me to St. Dunstan's. The archives of St. Dunstan's Boys' School were precisely the sort of place that made one sneeze before entering. Located behind the east wing, the small room smelled of dust, ink, and the weary persistence of long-forgotten paperwork. A thin layer of chalk-coloured dust coated every surface, including the spectacles of the elderly clerk who greeted them. The clerk, Mr. Felbury, peered at Tommy through smudged lenses. Beresford. Ah, yes, I recall your year. A boisterous lot. What brings you back after all this time? Research, Tuppence said sweetly before Tommy could fumble an explanation. Historical interest. Mr. Felbury brightened. Splendid! Records are all here. Though, mind you, the old ones aren't always reliable. Handwritten before the renovations, sometimes by men who could barely spell scholarship. He shuffled toward a high cabinet, rummaging through ledgers with the slow, deliberate movements of a man who believed haste to be a personal insult. Tommy glanced around uneasily. Nothing's changed, he murmured. Tuppence brushed a finger across a dusty shelf. Some things have changed. You're taller, for instance, and I doubt you wore a tie as straight as that at 17. Before Tommy could reply, Mr. Felbury returned, carrying 2 heavy volumes. Scholarship records, he announced, including details of beneficiaries. Tragic business, that one boy. What was his name? Harlan Wade. Got himself caught stealing, you know. Tommy stiffened. Did he, though? Oh, yes, Felbury said confidently. It's written here somewhere. He flipped through a page, then frowned. Or perhaps not. Peculiar. Tuppence leaned over his shoulder. The entry is in a different handwriting from the rest. Is it? Felbury adjusted his glasses. Well, looks like it was added later. Much later, judging by the ink fading. And recorded by someone with a shaky hand, Tuppence murmured. That's never promising. Felbury blinked. Still, the boy vanished after that scandal, so it must be true. Tommy felt a chill crawl up his spine. Or someone wanted it to be true. Tuppence nudged him gently. Look at this, Tommy. She pointed to a different page, one listing scholarship recipients. Edwin Price. Next to his name was a small notation referencing the Wade Trust, a fund established decades ago. Tommy exhaled sharply. So Edwin was connected to Harlan after all. More than connected, Tuppence said. He was literally funded by the legacy of a boy ruined by rumour. Felbury looked puzzled. Oh, the trust paid out little enough near the end. Records show it should have closed ages ago. But it didn't, Tuppence said thoughtfully. Or someone kept it open deliberately. Tommy felt the envelope in his pocket like a pulse, and Edwin knew something about it. Perhaps too much, Tuppence agreed. Felbury, oblivious to the mounting tension, continued paging through the ledger. Here we are, the note about Wade's theft. Very brief, very vague. In fact, astonishingly vague. He stroked his chin. Odd how accusations are sometimes recorded more thoroughly than facts. Who wrote it? Tommy asked. No initials, Felbury replied. That's the trouble. Some clerks thought themselves above signing things. But I do recall one thing. There was controversy at the time. Teachers arguing about how to handle it. One insisted Wade was innocent, while another pushed for disciplinary action. Which teacher? Tuppence asked sharply. Felbury shook his head apologetically. Memory's gone foggy after so many years. A convenient fog, Tuppence thought, but she smiled politely. You've been very helpful. As Felbury returned to his desk, Tommy sat on the edge of a table, the weight of the past heavy on his shoulders. Harlan was brilliant, he murmured. Odd, yes, but honest. We all knew it. And yet the moment a rumour touched him, we accepted it. No questions, no mercy. Tuppence placed a hand on his arm. Children can be cruel, but adults can be worse, and someone here was an adult making strategic choices. Tommy looked at her. You mean someone deliberately ruined him? Yes, Tuppence said calmly. Someone with access to these records, someone rewriting the past, and Edwin Price stumbled onto it. Tommy took a slow breath. Then we need to find him. We will, Tuppence promised, but first, we follow the paperwork. Paper leaves tracks, my dear, even when people try to bury them. She tapped the old ledger lightly, sending up a small puff of dust. "Someone told a lie," she said, "and someone believed it, but the real danger lies with the person who started it." Tommy nodded. "And Edwin may be the only one who knows how deep it goes." Tuppence closed the ledger gently, as though laying a patient to rest. "Then we don't have a schoolboy squabble," she said. "We have a motive." And with that, the past, once buried in dusty registers, began to breathe again. The door to Edwin Price's lodging house opened with the sound of an apologetic hinge, one of those squeaks that seemed to say, "I don't mean to intrude, but you really ought to know what's behind me." The landlady, a thin woman with hair coiled into a bun like an overwound clock spring, peered at Tommy and Tuppence with the wary caution of someone long accustomed to collecting rent from unreliable students. "You'll want to see his room, I suppose," she said. "Poor boy. I knew he was nervous, but I didn't think he'd run." Tuppence gave a disarming smile. "We're simply friends, hoping to understand where he's gone." "Oh, friends," the landlady sniffed. "Well, he could use some, I expect. Always scribbling notes, keeping odd hours, but polite enough." She led them up a narrow, creaking staircase. The air smelled faintly of boiled cabbage, laundry soap, and something subtler, a lingering trace of lavender polish that immediately made Tommy exchange a look with Tuppence. The landlady pushed open a door. Edwin's room was small, neat, and, most unsettling, clearly abandoned. The bed cover had been pulled back hastily, the pillowcase creased from a recent weight. 2 desk drawers hung open, but the desk itself had not been rifled through. Nothing valuable lay missing. No overturned lamp, no signs of struggle. Just absence. A very deliberate absence. Tuppence stepped inside first, her eyes narrowing. "He left in a hurry," she murmured, "but not the kind of hurry where one grabs possessions. This looks more like flight." Tommy walked toward the desk. An open notebook lay on the surface, its pages mostly blank except for 2 lines written in Edwin's small, tight hand. "Find the truth before they do." "The past was not his fault," Tuppence read over his shoulder. "Cryptic poetry. If only cryptic poetry paid the bills." "It never does," Tommy said. The landlady hovered by the doorframe, arms folded. "He had a visitor yesterday, before he disappeared." Tuppence looked up sharply. "A visitor? Man or woman?" "Woman. Middle-aged, nicely dressed but not friendly. Hard face, harder smile. She looked like the sort who snapped opinions instead of stating them." The landlady shivered. "Didn't like her, nor did Edwin." Tuppence's eyes gleamed. "You're certain he didn't know her?" "Quite certain. He went pale as a sheet when she arrived, tried to turn her away, but she insisted she'd only take a moment. They talked for 10 minutes. After she left, the boy paced like a trapped cat, kept muttering about time running out." A cold, creeping prickle ran through Tommy's spine. "Did she give a name?" "No, but she smelled like that fancy furniture polish they use in museums." Tommy shot Tuppence another look. They both remembered the identical scent from the envelope. "Well-dressed, middle-aged, hard smile," Tuppence repeated softly. "Someone accustomed to giving orders, someone experienced at getting what she wants." "And frightening Edwin enough to run," Tommy added. Tuppence knelt beside the desk, opening the second drawer fully. Inside lay several clipped newspaper articles, arranged with careful precision. Some were faded with age, others were fresh cuttings. "Harlan Wade," she murmured. "He's been researching the man." The first article detailed Harlan's early scholarship years, his promise, his academic brilliance. The second described his disappearance and the unresolved whispers surrounding it. The third, "This one's recent," Tommy said, lifting it, "about the Wade Scholarship Trust dissolving 20 years ago." "But something circled," Tuppence pointed out. A notation at the bottom of the article read, "Final ledger closed, all funds accounted for." Edwin had circled this with a bold, angry line. But another clipping was circled too, a small column repeating the old allegation that Harlan had been caught stealing from the scholarship accounts. Tuppence frowned. Odd that he circled both, one suggesting financial finality, the other repeating the rumour that ruined Harlan. Why would Edwin be revisiting that? "Maybe he believed it," Tommy said quietly. "Maybe he wasn't as certain of Harlan's innocence as we assumed." "Or," Tuppence countered, "maybe someone was presenting the lie to him again, hoping he'd believe it." She scanned the pile again and noticed a folded document underneath the clippings. Drawing it free, she unfolded it carefully. Financial statements, old ones, but not 20 years old. These were from last month. Tommy leaned in beside her. But that can't be right. The trust was dissolved decades ago. Yet here we have payments, Tuppence said, tapping a line with her fingertip. Deposits, withdrawals, all under the name of the Wade Trust. Someone's been keeping it alive, Tommy breathed, or resurrecting it. And paying someone, Tuppence added. But who? The financial statement bore no beneficiary name, just a reference number and a bank address across town. Edwin must have discovered this, Tommy said. It's probably what frightened him into fleeing, and what brought that mysterious lady to his door. Tuppence placed the papers aside and surveyed the room again. Something bothered her. The room was too orderly. No signs of rummaging. No signs he had been taken by force. It felt unnatural, she murmured. Tommy tilted his head. In what way? In every way, she replied. This room hasn't been abandoned. It's been stopped, like someone pressed pause on a life still very much in motion. Tommy ran a hand along the desk surface. He left not because he wanted to, but because someone scared him badly enough. Or, Tuppence said grimly, someone made sure he understood that staying would be unwise. The landlady cleared her throat. There was one other thing. When that woman left, she dropped this. I meant to return it, but, well, the boy was gone. She handed Tuppence a scrap of paper. Tuppence unfolded it. A fragment of a larger page, handwritten in elegant script. One name was clear, Mrs. Daphne Durnell. Tommy's eyebrows lifted. Durnell? Wasn't she involved with the school charities decades ago? More than involved, Tuppence recalled. Chairwoman, treasurer, patroness. She was practically royalty in school philanthropic circles. And she'd have known all about the scholarship trust, Tommy said. She'd have administered it, Tuppence added. At least in part. That sounds very much like our visiting lady, Tommy concluded. Tuppence tucked the scrap of paper into her coat pocket. Mrs. Durnell will be expecting questions, and if she's the sort who dismisses young scholars with arrogance, she'll underestimate us entirely. Tommy glanced at the open drawers, the empty bed, the clipped articles, the stray scent of lavender polish. Whatever Edwin found, he murmured, it frightened him nearly to death. Tuppence looked around one more time, her expression sharpening with quiet resolve. Then let's be very quick indeed. She took Tommy's arm as they stepped into the hallway. The landlady watched them go. If you find him, she said softly, tell him he still owes half a week's rent. Tuppence smiled. We'll see he pays it. But as they descended the stairs and stepped back into the bustle of Bloomsbury, both detectives felt it, the unmistakable prickle of being watched. A carriage passed too slowly, a pedestrian paused too long. A shop window reflected not just themselves, but a shifting shadow across the street. Tommy, Tuppence said quietly, we aren't the only ones looking for Edwin. Tommy nodded grimly. Then we had better find him first. They set off toward their next lead, a certain Mrs. Daphne Durnell, and behind them, unnoticed by the crowd, the curtain of Edwin Price's vanished life fluttered shut. If one wished to find the very epicenter of polished propriety in Bloomsbury, it would unquestionably be located behind the glossy black door of number 17 Belgrave Court. The brass knocker shone with such fierce devotion that Tommy felt it might reprimand anyone who dared touch it without gloves. Tuppence, however, rapped it smartly, her expression bright with the sort of politeness she reserved for people she fully intended to interrogate. Within seconds the door swung open, and a maid, immaculately dressed, spine as straight as an exclamation mark, ushered them inside. The entrance hall smelled of beeswax, lavender polish, and something faintly metallic beneath, as though the house itself kept secrets inside its walls. Mrs. Daphne Durnell waited in her drawing-room like a queen prepared to receive courtiers. She wore a pale grey dress that matched the silver in her carefully waved hair, and every gesture conveyed a serene authority. The room around her was less a drawing-room and more a monument to good works. Framed certificates from various charities, photographs of smiling schoolboys, awards bestowed by civic committees, and a shelf of thick ledgers bound with precise ribbons. Mr. and Mrs. Beresford, she said warmly, extending a hand. Her smile was gracious, but her eyes, sharp, cool and calculating, missed nothing. Do come in. I so rarely receive visitors with purpose these days. Everyone calls only to congratulate or consult. It becomes dreadfully predictable. Tuppence returned the smile. Predictability can be comforting, she said lightly, but we hope our visit today may offer something a bit livelier. Tommy watched Durnell closely as he spoke next. We've come to ask about Edwin Price. At the name, the faintest flicker passed across her face, gone so quickly it could have been a trick of the light. Still, Tuppence saw it. She always saw these things. Durnell gestured toward a small sofa upholstered in pale blue satin. Edwin, yes, a bright young man, though admittedly prone to imaginative leaps. Fragile, poor dear. I tried to guide him toward stability, but he was never quite settled. Tea? The maid appeared with a tray almost immediately, as if anticipating the request minutes before it was spoken. The cups were delicate, edged with gold, the sort of heirloom porcelain that trembled at the slightest disturbance. Tuppence accepted hers, inhaling the steam without drinking. We understand Edwin visited you recently, she said. Yesterday, in fact. Durnell stirred her tea with meticulous precision. Indeed, he arrived without warning, quite flustered, though he attempted to disguise it. Spoke nonsense about investigations and responsibilities. Very dramatic. I fear he was overwhelmed by his own imagination. Tommy leaned forward. And yet, he disappeared shortly afterward. At this, Durnell's hand jerked, just slightly, but enough to cause the thin porcelain teacup to crack with a delicate, startling tick. A hairline fracture cut across the rim like a sudden fault in an otherwise perfect surface. The maid darted forward to replace the cup, and Durnell smiled as though nothing at all had occurred. But the silence afterward was taut, the room holding its breath. People disappear when their minds are unsettled, she replied coolly. Edwin always seemed on the brink of some internal storm, but I assure you, his vanishing act is no reflection on me. Tuppence feigned a thoughtful sip. It's curious, she mused. Edwin mentioned a promise, something he owed to someone connected with Tommy's school days. The name Harlan Wade surfaced. For the first time, Durnell's poise faltered. Not visibly, she was too polished for that, but her eyelids tightened, her teacup paused mid-air, and the muscles at her jaw flickered just once. Harlan Wade, she repeated, a regrettable blot on the school's history. His conduct, I'm afraid, cast a shadow over the good work we tried so hard to accomplish. His removal spared us all quite a nuisance. The phrasing struck Tuppence like a pinprick. Nuisance, she echoed. Not thief. That's the term the records use. Durnell blinked, then recovered. Well, yes, that was the accusation at the time. But truly he was a burden even before that. A boy with far too much cleverness and not enough discipline. Certain minds thrive on causing disruption. Harlan was one. Tommy's breath caught. She had slipped. Every official record they'd examined painted Harlan as a thief, not a burden. Durnell's correction suggested knowledge beyond the public version, knowledge she should not have had unless she was involved at the time. Tuppence placed her teacup down with the gentlest of clicks. You knew him well, then? Durnell folded her hands. I knew him well enough to recognize potential trouble. When one contributes to a scholarship fund, one naturally wishes the recipient to reflect the integrity of the institution. Tommy let his gaze drift across the room, seemingly idly, until it landed on a bronze plaque half hidden among certificates. He stood and walked toward it. This is interesting, he said. Durnell did not turn her head, but Tuppence saw a muscle tighten in her throat. Ah, yes, she said, a small acknowledgement from the school. Treasurer of the Wade Scholarship Trust many years ago. Ancient history. Tommy studied the plaque. Treasurer, he repeated, running his finger along the engraved letters. And yet, according to financial documents, the trust was still active last month. Durnell's composure cracked, not visibly, but like pressure under glass. Impossible, she said briskly. The trust dissolved decades ago. I signed the final ledger myself. Tuppence met Tommy's eyes. They didn't need words. Edwin seemed to think otherwise, Tuppence said softly. He was quite distressed by what he found. Durnell's expression iced over. Then Edwin was mistaken. or meddling, or both. Young men often fixate on irrelevancies, and if he vanished, I dare say he simply wanted attention, a tedious habit. Tuppence leaned back. Edwin didn't strike me as the dramatic type. People can surprise you, Durnell replied sharply, especially when they indulge their delusions. Tommy stepped closer to the centre of the room. And what delusion would that be? That the past still matters, Durnell said. That a name long forgotten has any bearing on today. Really, Mr. Beresford, these ancient stories shouldn't concern you. Tuppence smiled pleasantly. But they concern someone enough to search Edwin's life, enough to frighten him, enough to leave traces of fear behind. Durnell took another measured sip of tea, though her hand trembled slightly beneath the surface calm. If Edwin is frightened, perhaps he should seek proper medical reassurance rather than conjuring ghosts from school records. I cannot imagine why he would involve you. He said he was fulfilling a promise, Tommy replied, to someone linked to my school days, possibly Harlan, possibly someone who wanted the truth revealed. Durnell set her cup down, too carefully this time. Truth, she said, her voice controlled but chillingly thin. Truth is a luxury, Mr. Beresford, and not everyone is equipped to handle it. Tuppence noted the slight emphasis on everyone, and the way Durnell's gaze flicked briefly toward the door, as if checking for the maid, or listening for something unseen. We appreciate your time, Tuppence said, rising gracefully, and the tea, though I suspect the conversation has been far more illuminating than you intended. Durnell stood as well, smoothing her dress. I hope you find Edwin quickly, she said with impeccable civility, though I doubt his troubles have anything to do with me. But the tension in the room lingered like a taut string. As Tommy and Tuppence walked toward the exit, Tuppence paused to glance once more at the bronze plaque. Treasurer of the Scholarship Trust. The trust still active, funds still moving. Durnell's reactions too sharp, too rehearsed. Outside, when the door clicked shut behind them, Tommy let out a low breath. She's lying, he said simply. Profusely, Tuppence agreed, and with the confidence of someone who's been lying for years. Tommy stared back at the polished door. She knows what happened to Harlan Wade. More importantly, Tuppence murmured, she knows what happened to Edwin Price. And somewhere inside number 17 Belgrave Court, they both sensed the truth was waiting, locked away like all the other polished secrets Mrs. Daphne Durnell kept so very neatly hidden. The iron gate leading into St. Dunstan's grounds gave a protesting groan as Tommy pushed it open, a sound as familiar to him as the echo of boys' laughter on the playing fields or the stern clack of the headmaster's cane on classroom linoleum. Yet stepping through it again, years later, felt different, like walking into an old photograph whose edges had begun to curl. Tuppence walked beside him, her pace brisk, her eyes alert. She seemed to be listening not to the echo of the past, but to the present tense tension clinging to the air. Places like this never really change, she said, gesturing to the red brick buildings. Only the people inside them do. Tommy shook his head. Some of us come back whether we like it or not. They made their way across the courtyard to the main building, where the caretaker's office sat tucked beneath a flight of stone steps. A dingy glass panel bore the name Mr. Lyle in peeling paint. Tommy knocked. A moment later, the door cracked open, revealing a weary face lined with decades of schoolboy misdemeanours. Mr. Lyle looked as though he had personally survived every prank St. Dunstan's had ever produced. Yes? He asked, suspicion rising instantly. He clearly disliked unexpected visitors. Tommy introduced himself, and Lyle's eyebrows lifted. Beresford. Yes, I remember you lot. Always running in places you shouldn't. Some things never change, Tuppence said cheerfully, stepping forward. We're looking for information about a former student, Harlan Wade. At that, Lyle's face tightened like a thread pulled too hard. Wade? Now there's a name buried deep. Why stir it up? Because the past is spilling into our present, Tuppence said, and we'd like to catch it before it stains the carpet. Mr. Lyle exhaled heavily, then opened the door wider. Come in then, but mind your step. I've been meaning to fix that board since 1949. The office was cramped, cluttered with broken brooms, bundles of twine, a stack of forgotten cricket bats, and an old gramophone that looked permanently exiled from the music room. A small kettle hissed on a portable burner. Tommy got to the point. We understand Harlan worked part-time somewhere on the grounds? Lyle rubbed his neck. Bell tower. He was a quiet boy, always up there tinkering. Some said he kept personal bits and bobs in the walls, left behind things he didn't want anyone else seeing. Tuppence perked up. And did anyone ever look? Lyle shrugged. Not that I know of. Everyone was too busy spreading gossip about him. Shame, really. Boy deserved better. Tommy swallowed hard. Better. Harlan deserved better from him too. May we look at the bell tower? Tommy asked. Lyle gave them a long, measuring stare, then he nodded. If you're stirring up Wade's name, you might as well stir up whatever he hid. But watch your step. That place isn't maintained anymore. The bell tower rose above the courtyard like a forgotten sentinel, its stonework weathered and the wooden door splintered with age. Inside, a narrow ladder spiraled up into dimness. Tuppence eyed it critically. If I fall, I'm haunting this school forever. Tommy smiled, though tension thrummed beneath it. I'll make sure to visit regularly. They climbed, the ladder creaking beneath their weight. Dust drifted in their wake like ancient snow. Near the top, the space opened into the bell loft, an airy room where light filtered through slatted windows, illuminating suspended cobwebs and the great bell itself, silent now, cold metal catching muted glimmers. It feels untouched, Tuppence whispered, like a museum display of neglect. Tommy scanned the room. Wooden beams overhead, chalky dust on the floor, a faint smell of rust and old rope. Where would a boy hide something, he murmured. Somewhere his hands could reach, but adults wouldn't think to look, Tuppence said. Behind something loose, something that wouldn't attract attention. Tommy ran his fingers along the stone walls, gently pressing. On the third section, a brick shifted beneath his touch, barely perceptible, but enough to stir a pulse of adrenaline. Tuppence, he said softly. Here. Together they pried the brick free. Behind it lay a small tin, dull with age but undisturbed. Tommy lifted it with reverent care. The lid resisted at first, then gave way with a faint snap. Inside lay a folded school timetable, yellowed but legible. A small list of initials, penciled hurriedly, some half smudged, and a single slip of paper containing 6 words. I didn't take it. I saw who did. Tommy froze. The handwriting was unmistakable. Harlan's. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. The dust-laden air felt suddenly too heavy, the walls too close. He had believed Harlan guilty, believed the rumor that had poisoned the boy's life. And here, in this hidden confession, was proof the boy had known who truly took the funds. Tuppence touched Tommy's arm, steadying him. He wasn't the thief, she murmured. No, Tommy whispered, and someone didn't want anyone to know. Tuppence unfolded the list of initials. These must be clues, a list of those involved, or those he suspected. Tommy leaned in. The letters were scattered. ML, DD, ST, RB, TB. Tuppence inhaled sharply. Tommy. TB. That's you. His stomach dropped. But why list me? I didn't... I know, Tuppence interrupted firmly. You didn't take anything. But maybe he wrote the initials of everyone connected. Maybe he was warning you. Or implicating me, Tommy said quietly. Tuppence shook her head. Harlan knew you weren't cruel. You repeated something you overheard. Nothing more. If he listed your initials, it was because he believed you were part of a chain, not the cause. Tommy wasn't so sure. The guilt that had gnawed at him for decades stirred again, sharp-edged and insistent. Tuppence placed her hand over his. Look at the other initials. They don't make sense yet, but they will. He nodded slowly, folding the papers with care and placing them back in the tin. We need to take this with us, he said. Tuppence stood, brushing dust from her skirt. Agreed. If Harlan hid this, he meant it to be found. Then, the sound that froze them both. Slam! The tower door below banged shut with decisive force. Tuppence's voice dropped to a whisper. We're not alone. Tommy moved to the edge of the loft, peering down the spiraling ladder. The shadows below stretched long and unbroken, but not empty. A faint shuffle echoed upward, as though someone had taken one slow step backward. Tuppence joined him. Do you see anyone? No, Tommy murmured. But someone's there. Someone who doesn't want us finding anything else. Another sound. A faint click, as if the door latch had been turned from the outside. Tuppence's eyes flicked to the tin in Tommy's hand. They came for this. And we're trapped up here unless we go down, he said. His voice remained steady, but tension hummed beneath it. Then we go down, Tuppence whispered, but carefully. They descended, each rung groaning under their weight. Halfway down, Tuppence stopped abruptly. She pointed at the ladder's lowest section. A footprint, a fresh one, marked the dust. Small, the imprint of a narrow leather shoe, a woman's. Tommy met Tuppence's gaze. "Durnell," they said together. The tower door remained shut. The courtyard beyond was silent, the kind of silence that suggested someone had slipped away moments before. Tommy exhaled slowly. "She followed us." Tuppence nodded. "And she knows we found something." Tommy gripped the tin beneath his coat. "Then she's more desperate than we thought." Tuppence stepped outside the tower, scanning the grounds. This isn't just old guilt. This is a living crime, something she's still protecting. Tommy turned toward her, jaw set. "Then we keep going." Tuppence gave a small, fierce smile. "Well, darling, we're in it now." They walked away from the bell tower together, unaware that from a shadowed alcove, unseen eyes watched them depart, cold, calculating, and utterly intent on ensuring the truth remained buried. The echo of the slamming tower door still rang in Tommy's ears as he and Tuppence hurried down the final rungs of the ladder. The air in the bell tower felt charged, as though someone had just drawn a curtain on a clandestine performance. Tommy reached the bottom first and tested the latch. It moved easily, no longer locked. Whoever had slammed it had since slipped away. Tuppence stepped beside him, eyes sharp. "Someone wanted us to know they were here," she said quietly, "or wanted us to leave before we found anything else." "Then they miscalculated," Tommy replied. He opened the door cautiously and looked out into the courtyard. A faint breeze stirred the grass. The buildings loomed silent. And yet, Tuppence inhaled. Lavender polish. Tommy smelled it too. Faint, fresh, a breadcrumb of scent trailing into the corridor leading toward the archives. Without hesitation, Tuppence strode forward, shoes tapping crisply on the stone walkway. Tommy followed, the tin from the bell tower tucked safely beneath his coat. Inside, the corridor stretched long and empty, lit by a row of high windows that cast pale rectangles of afternoon light along the floor. Their footsteps echoed, soft, rhythmic, but not alone. Tap, tap, tap. The echo of another set preceded them, faster, lighter, purposeful. Tuppence froze mid-step, head tilted. "Do you hear that?" "Someone ahead of us," Tommy whispered. The tapping quickened. Tuppence set off instantly. Tommy followed, adrenaline sparking through his limbs. Their footsteps clattered down the corridor as they turned a corner, then another, passing locked classrooms and glass cases filled with outdated sports trophies. A flutter of movement flickered at the far end of the hall, a shadow pulling back just before they arrived. "Tuppence," Tommy hissed. "I saw it," she said, someone very much hoping not to be seen. They reached a junction of 3 intersecting hallways. The scent hit them more strongly now. Lavender polish, unmistakably the same scent from Edwin's envelope. Tuppence touched the wall lightly. "Fresh. Applied recently. She must use it often." "She?" Tommy echoed. "That footprint in the tower wasn't made by a man," Tuppence replied, "and nobody else we've met so far has a penchant for museum-grade polish." Tommy's jaw hardened. "Mrs. Durnell." "Or someone working for her," Tuppence murmured. "In either case, follow the scent." They chose the left corridor, the one lined with tall windows overlooking the courtyard. Ahead, a door squeaked shut. Tommy lunged forward and pushed through it, finding himself in a narrow passage flanked by old notice boards. The boards were plastered with faded event posters, some curling at the edges, others torn. Another sound drifted from ahead, a hurried shuffle, perhaps a misstep, the faintest scuff of leather on tile. "There," Tuppence whispered, pointing at a stairwell door swinging slowly closed. They sprinted. Tommy flung the door open. The staircase spiraled downward toward the basement archives. The dim light revealed a blur of movement 2 flights below, just a flicker of dark fabric, the edge of a coat, then nothing. "She's fast," Tommy breathed. "She's frightened," Tuppence corrected. "People run fastest when their secrets are about to be caught." They descended rapidly, careful but determined. Yet when they reached the basement floor, the corridor stretched out empty. Still, the lavender scent clung to the air like an accusation. Tuppence scanned the hallway. She wasn't far ahead. She can't have vanished. Tommy crouched near the dusty floor. Look. A fresh footprint. Small, narrow, the heel worn only slightly. Expensive leather. The kind wealthy women wore when they wished to look tasteful without appearing extravagant. She was here, Tommy said. And she turned left, Tuppence replied, pointing to where the faint dust trace shifted. They moved down the corridor. The archive door was ajar. Tommy pushed it fully open. Inside, the room lay dim and quiet, shelves of aging records standing in patient rows. Dust lay thick on every surface, except one. A box of ledgers had been disturbed recently, edges marked with clean smudges where hands had lifted them. Tuppence examined the shelf. She was here minutes ago. Why risk coming down to the archives unless she wanted to remove something? Tommy approached the ledgers and frowned. These are treasurer records from the Wade Trust. And look, Tuppence said, withdrawing a folder. Page missing. Tommy felt cold. She's destroying evidence. Or relocating it, Tuppence murmured. Destroying might be too risky, but hiding again? That she would do. Tommy turned in a slow circle. How did she slip past us? There's only one corridor. Unless, Tuppence said thoughtfully, she doubled back, or used another exit, or waited for us to pass her hiding place. A long shadow stretched across the floor as a cloud passed over the high window. The room grew momentarily darker, quieter. Tuppence folded her arms. She knew exactly where she was going, and exactly how to lose us. She's done this before, Tommy muttered. She nodded, which raises the question, how long has Daphne Durnell been covering her tracks? Later, back in their upstairs office at St. Dunstan's, Tommy sat at a scarred wooden desk while Tuppence inspected the tin they'd retrieved from the bell tower. With gentle fingers she unfolded the documents again, pausing on the small scrap Tommy hadn't examined thoroughly before, a thin, browned receipt tucked beneath the timetable. "Tommy," she said softly, "look at this." He leaned forward. The receipt, issued by an organization Tommy vaguely remembered as a philanthropic club, displayed a date that made his stomach clench. "The same month Harlan vanished," he whispered, "and the recipient of the donation." Tuppence tilted it toward the light. "Mrs. Daphne Durnell." He swallowed. "A donation from the trust." "Not explicitly listed," she said, "but the handwriting is sloppy, the ink is faded, and I'd wager my best hat that this was hidden by Harlan for a reason." Tommy sank back slowly. "Tuppence, at 17 I overheard a conversation in the corridor. Two teachers talking. One said something about missing funds, but there was more. A second voice, it said, 'Let him take the blame.'" Tuppence's expression sharpened. "You never told me that." "I didn't remember it clearly, or I didn't want to." His voice dropped, raw. "I had convinced myself the part I played was accidental. But what if someone wanted me to overhear it? What if they used me to spread the rumor deliberately?" Tuppence put a hand on his shoulder. "Then the lie wasn't yours. It was planted." Tommy looked at the tin. This receipt. Harlan must have found something that tied Durnell to the missing money. "And someone ensured he disappeared before anyone believed him," Tuppence said quietly. Tommy closed his eyes briefly. "And now Edwin found the same trail." "Yes," Tuppence's voice was steady. "And whoever followed us today will do anything to keep that trail from resurfacing." A knock on the office door startled them both. Tommy stiffened, but Tuppence motioned him to remain seated. She approached with careful steps and opened it a crack. Only a teacher stood there, asking if they needed anything. She dismissed him politely, then shut the door again. Tommy exhaled. "Jumping at shadows isn't like us." "We're not jumping at shadows," Tuppence said. "We're jumping at a woman who hides in them." Tommy stood and watched the silent room. "We need to find Edwin, before she does." "Agreed," Tuppence said. "And we need to determine who else she's manipulating. People who protect their reputations are often surrounded by accomplices, some willing, some unaware, some trapped." Tommy paced slowly. "Mr. Lyle knew Harlan worked in the tower. Did he know more? The initials in the tin, ML, could be him." "And DD for Daphne Durnell," Tuppence added. "But then there's TB. You. Tommy ran a hand through his hair. Harlan didn't think I was guilty. He must have put me on the list to warn me, or because he heard me repeat what I overheard. He was creating a map, Tuppence said thoughtfully, a list of people connected to the truth. And someone else saw that list, Tommy murmured, someone who needed it buried. A silence settled over them like a weight. Finally, Tuppence placed the tin into her handbag, an odd artifact among its usual residents, and straightened her coat. "We aren't finished here," she said. "Not even close. The smell of lavender polish is still too fresh." Tommy nodded, determination settling into his features. "She's still here, somewhere on these grounds." Tuppence opened the office door slowly, scanning the corridor. "Then let's catch her before she has time to vanish again." But when they stepped outside, the corridor, long, pale, and lined with midday shadows, was empty. Too empty. And the faint scent of lavender polish drifted upward like a whisper from the stairs below. The lamplight outside the Beresfords' flat flickered uncertainly, as though it were having second thoughts about illuminating the night. Tommy and Tuppence rounded the corner together, speaking in low, urgent tones about Mrs. Durnell, about the bell tower, about the unseen woman who had slipped away like smoke. But all conversations stopped the moment they saw the figure on their doorstep. A young man sat hunched on the cold stone step, his arms wrapped tightly around himself. His coat was rumpled, his hair plastered to his forehead, his breathing uneven. At the sound of their approach, he lifted his head. "Mr. Beresford," he whispered. "Edwin!" Tuppence hurried forward. "Good heavens, what on earth?" It was only then that she saw the smear of blood on his cuff. Not bright, fresh blood, but dried in a rusty streak. Tommy crouched beside him. "Are you hurt?" "No," Edwin rasped. "It isn't mine." He shuddered violently, whether from cold, fear, or something deeper. Tommy helped him stand, and Tuppence unlocked the door with quick, deft movements. Inside, the flat was warm, lit by a single lamp and the faint glow of the mantel clock. They guided Edwin to the settee. When he sat, he clutched the sides of the cushion as if anchoring himself to something solid. Tuppence fetched a glass of water and placed it in his trembling hands. "Start slowly," she said. "We're here, no one else." Edwin swallowed hard, the glass rattling faintly. I didn't know where else to go." "Tell us what happened," Tommy said gently. Edwin stared into space for several seconds, pupils dilated, expression distant. Then words came in bursts, like water forcing its way around stones. "I was near Russell Square," he said. "I was trying to get to the station. I thought, if I could get out of London, if I could get anywhere else, maybe I'd be safe. But then I saw a man lying on the ground. He was bleeding. His head had struck something, I think. I don't know if he was attacked or if he fell. I don't know." He pressed the heel of his hand against his temple. "I tried to help him. I tried to see if he was breathing, but then I heard footsteps." Tuppence leaned forward. "Footsteps?" "Behind me. Slow at first, then faster. A woman's footsteps." His voice cracked. "I know the difference. I've been listening for days." Tommy exchanged a look with Tuppence. "Did you see her face?" "No," Edwin whispered. "But I know her. The way she walks. Stiff, determined. And the perfume. Furniture polish. Always that smell." He closed his eyes tightly. "I knew if she saw me there, she'd think I'd spoken to the man, or that the man had spoken to me. I ran. I ran without thinking." "Good," Tuppence said quietly. "You did the right thing." Edwin shook his head. "I shouldn't have left him. He might have been alive. I panicked." "You're alive because you did," Tommy said. "Whoever she is, she's dangerous." Edwin clutched his coat. "She followed me from St. Dunstan's, I'm certain of it. Ever since I found the ledger entries, I've sensed someone behind me. Not always close, but always there." Tuppence placed a steadying hand on his arm. "You're safe now. Nothing gets past that door. Now tell us the rest. You said you were trying to reach us earlier. What truth were you trying to reveal?" Edwin hesitated, deeply, painfully. Then he whispered the words. "It wasn't about Harlan Wade, not really." Tommy frowned. "The lie?" "The lie," Edwin said, nodding. "The one someone fed you. The one that ruined Harlan's life. The one you repeated." Tommy's breath caught in his throat. Edwin continued. You thought you heard teachers talking. You thought you overheard them uncovering theft, but you didn't hear teachers. Tommy sat down slowly. What do you mean? Edwin's hands shook again. It wasn't teachers. It was two people who shouldn't have been anywhere near that corridor. They placed themselves where boys might overhear. They wanted you to overhear. They needed someone young, impressionable, trustworthy-looking to spread the story for them. Tuppence's eyes sharpened. Are you saying it was staged? Yes, Edwin whispered. It was staged, planned, executed perfectly. A lie delivered to the ears most likely to pass it along. Tommy stared at him. But who? Who would do that? Edwin opened his mouth, and then his entire body went rigid. His pupils widened to black discs. His breath came in rapid, shallow bursts, and his hand clutched at his chest. Edwin, Tuppence said sharply. Edwin, what's wrong? He tried to speak. His lips parted, but no sound came. His body trembled violently, then sagged. Tommy caught him before he fell sideways on the settee. Tuppence, he's fainted. No, she said, examining him quickly. Collapsed. It's exhaustion, shock, fear. He's been running on panic for days. Edwin's chest rose and fell steadily, but his eyes remained closed. The smear of blood on his cuff stood out starkly against the pale fabric. Tommy sat back, shaken. He was about to tell us something crucial. He told us plenty, Tuppence said, voice soft but tight. He confirmed Harlan was framed. But more than that, whoever fed you the lie used you intentionally. You didn't just repeat something unfortunate, you were selected. Tommy's shoulders slumped, which means they knew who I was. They were watching me. Or watching Harlan, Tuppence corrected, and you were merely convenient. Tommy stared at Edwin's unconscious form. The lie wasn't about Harlan. It was about me. Tuppence nodded slowly. About controlling what you believed. About making you a tool. Tommy's jaw clenched. I was 17. I didn't know anything. Precisely why you were chosen, Tuppence replied gently. But there's more. Something Edwin couldn't finish. Tommy rubbed his forehead. We need him awake. He needs rest, Tuppence said, and warmth. She fetched a blanket and wrapped it around him. We'll let him sleep here tonight. Tommy stood and began pacing, small, tight circles around the room. His mind raced through memories he'd buried so deep he no longer recognized them. Hallways, whispers, a voice saying, let him take the blame. Who would want to ruin Harlan? He asked aloud. What could they possibly gain? Money, Tuppence said. Power, influence, or simply removing an inconvenient boy who saw something he shouldn't have. Tommy stopped pacing. What did Harlan see? That, Tuppence said, is our next question. She moved to the table and gathered the papers from the tin, the timetable, the initials, and the receipt. Oh, that telling little receipt. Tommy, she said quietly, look again at the date. He did. The same month Harlan disappeared. And the same month funds were missing, she added. Tommy inhaled sharply. Durnell, it has to be. Tuppence shook her head. Possibly, but let's not leap. Someone else could have been the hand while she was merely the face. Tommy rubbed the bridge of his nose. Fine, but she was treasurer, and she's been following Edwin. Tuppence looked at Edwin again. She's escalating, following us, following him. Someone's terrified the truth will break loose. Tommy sank into a chair, and Edwin knows who. Tuppence considered. He knows the direction, maybe not the entire chain. Tommy stared at the tin. Those initials, ML is Lyle, DD is Durnell, TB is me. But what about ST and RB? We'll find them, Tuppence said, all of them. And Edwin said the lie wasn't about Harlan, it was about me. Tommy swallowed. What does that mean, Tuppence? Tuppence crossed to him, resting her hand lightly on his shoulder. That someone shaped your belief to shape the outcome. They used you to spread the rumor that cleared the real thief of suspicion. Tommy stared ahead, voice low. I helped them. You were a boy, Tuppence said firmly. They were adults manipulating events. He nodded but looked unconvinced. A soft groan interrupted the room. Edwin shifted slightly, eyes fluttering but not opening. Tuppence knelt beside him. "Rest," she whispered. "When you wake, we'll finish the conversation." Tommy stood at the window and peered out. The street was quiet. Too quiet. A solitary lamplighter moved in the distance. Tuppence joined him. "Do you see anything?" "No," he murmured, "but I feel it." "The perfume?" Tuppence asked softly. He nodded. "It lingers, even outside." Tuppence looked at the unconscious young man on their couch. "Then we have very little time." Tommy exhaled, long and steady. "When Edwin wakes, he'll tell us the rest." Tuppence squared her shoulders. "And when he does, the person behind all this will lose their last advantage: secrecy." But in the hallway outside their door, where neither of them could see, a shadow moved, pausing just long enough to listen, then gliding silently away. The Beresford sitting room had rarely felt so still. Outside, the street lamps cast long amber streaks on the curtains, and the tick of the mantel clock seemed unreasonably loud. Edwin lay wrapped in a blanket on the settee, his breathing shallow but steady. A cup of warm tea cooled untouched on the small table beside him. Tommy stood at the window, staring out into the quiet street as if expecting danger to materialize from the fog of night. "He's been asleep for hours," he said quietly. Tuppence, seated on the armchair opposite Edwin, nodded. "He needs it. Panic is exhausting work." Tommy turned from the window. His guilt still churned beneath his ribs. Guilt for the past, for Harlan, for the role he had unintentionally played, for the fear now etched into Edwin's every breath. He crossed the room and poured himself a glass of water he didn't truly want. As the glass touched his lips, Edwin stirred. Tuppence was at his side immediately. "Edwin, can you hear me?" Edwin's eyelids fluttered. His hand shifted beneath the blanket. Then his eyes opened, dazed at first, then widening with recognition. "Mrs. Beresford, Mr. Beresford." Tommy set the glass on the table and knelt beside him. "Easy. There's no rush. Start whenever you're ready." Edwin swallowed hard. "I didn't think I'd wake up. I thought," his voice trembled, "I thought she'd find me first." "She didn't," Tuppence said calmly. "And she won't. Now tell us what you've been trying to say since the moment we met you." Edwin rubbed a hand across his face. "It's such a tangled mess. I barely slept for days trying to piece it together." "Well," Tuppence said gently, "untangle it for us." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "It began with a ledger, an old one. I volunteer at the school archives sometimes, filing records, organizing receipts, that sort of thing. One evening I found a bundle of papers misfiled, shoved between two cricket scorebooks." Tommy leaned in. "Go on." "They were scholarship documents from Harlan Wade's year. Original records, not the ones we saw recently. Those were altered." Tommy felt a tremor run through him. "Altered by whom?" "Mrs. Durnell," Edwin whispered. "Or someone acting under her direction." Tuppence's eyes narrowed. "What kind of alterations?" "Figures changed," Edwin said. "Amounts shifted. Notes added years after the fact. Someone rewrote the trust's financial history to make it appear stable and legitimate, while siphoning money from it." Tommy exhaled slowly. "Then Harlan wasn't the thief?" "No," Edwin shook his head. "He was the whistleblower." Tuppence's heartbeat quickened. "Explain." Edwin's fingers tightened around the blanket. "You know that receipt you found in the tin? The one dated the month Harlan vanished? It was part of a pattern. Small but regular transactions started disappearing from the scholarship funds. Harlan noticed. He was brilliant with numbers. He confronted someone, I don't know who, but someone panicked." "And created a rumor," Tuppence finished softly. Edwin nodded. "She, Mrs. Durnell, couldn't risk being exposed, so she manipulated the situation. She needed someone to spread a story without realizing its significance. Someone trustworthy, someone naive." Tommy felt the blow before Edwin said the words. "You," Edwin whispered. "She used you, Mr. Beresford. She staged the overheard conversation. She placed herself where a boy might listen. She let you hear what she wanted you to hear." Tommy closed his eyes. The memory flashed with new, chilling clarity. Whispers carried along the corridor, a stern voice mentioning missing funds, another voice urging that someone take the blame, boots pacing deliberately until a schoolboy rounded the corner at just the right moment. Tuppence touched his arm, grounding him. Edwin continued, voice cracking. She didn't care what it did to Harlan. She only cared about saving herself. Tommy opened his eyes slowly. I destroyed his name. No, Tuppence corrected firmly. She did. You were merely a tool. Edwin shook his head. A tool she counted on. She assumed you'd repeat it, and you did. And once the rumour spread, the school had to act. Harlan became untouchable, a convenient villain, a boy with no family influence to protect him. Tommy looked stricken. And then? Edwin's hands gripped the blanket tighter. He tried to prove his innocence. He collected evidence. That tin in the tower wasn't the only thing he hid. He planned to report everything, to the headmaster, to the school governors. But someone found out. Tuppence felt her stomach twist. Mrs. Durnell. Or someone helping her, Edwin said faintly. I haven't untangled all the threads yet, but someone warned her, and Harlan vanished. Tommy stared at the floor. I was part of it. You were 17, Edwin urged. You were innocent. But she weaponized your innocence. And when I began investigating the trust, when I found the altered records, I realized the same thing was starting again. Someone was following me, watching me, making sure I didn't get too close. And that someone, Tuppence said, is the woman with the stiff walk. Edwin nodded miserably. Durnell, or someone loyal to her. I saw the footsteps behind me, heard her perfume. It's the same scent she wore when she visited my lodgings. I didn't want to involve anyone else, especially not you. But I realized the lie you carried all these years. It wasn't yours. It was planted. And you deserve to know that, Mr. Beresford. Tommy swallowed. Anger, sharp, controlled but deep, rose like heat beneath his skin. She used me to destroy a boy's life, and she nearly destroyed yours. Edwin's voice broke. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but I was frightened. When I went back to the school last night, I saw someone removing ledgers, old ones, the ones that showed the trust payments. Tuppence's eyes sharpened. Removing or destroying? Edwin hesitated. I don't know. They carried them toward the side exit, then disappeared. And you're certain it was a woman? Tuppence asked. He nodded. I saw the silhouette, the posture, the walk, stiff, determined, and then I caught the perfume in the air. Lavender polish, Tommy murmured. Yes, Edwin whispered. I'm certain of it. Tuppence stood and walked slowly around the room, thinking. Then the cover-up isn't decades behind us. It's still happening. Someone has been keeping the trust alive, maintaining the illusion of legitimacy, and now erasing the evidence as we get closer. Tommy straightened, resolve solidifying like steel. We're not retreating. Retreat, Tuppence snorted softly. Hardly. We've just found the lever that topples the house of cards. Edwin watched them both, eyes hollow. You're not afraid? Terribly, Tuppence said with cheerful honesty. But bravery is simply fear with good posture. Tommy sat beside Edwin. You've done more than enough. The rest is our work now. No, Edwin said fiercely. I won't run again. I can help. I know where the remaining scholarship ledgers are stored. I memorized the catalogue numbers. They're hidden in the second basement wing, rarely used, mostly forgotten. Tuppence raised an eyebrow. How on earth did you get access to that wing? I volunteer more hours than they can keep track of, Edwin said, managing a faint smile. I tidied the place myself. Tommy patted his shoulder. You're braver than you know. Edwin looked suddenly small again. I don't feel brave. I feel like a rabbit. That's all right, Tuppence said. We've met many rabbits who outran foxes. Silence settled gently around them. Outside, a carriage rattled past, its wheels humming over cobblestones. Edwin closed his eyes, exhaustion weighing heavily, but his voice held clarity. Harlan wasn't a thief, he whispered. He was trying to save the trust, save the other scholarship boys, and they repaid him with exile. Tommy nodded. Not anymore. We'll repair his name. And expose the truth, Tuppence added. Edwin sagged back, eyelids drooping. I knew you'd understand. That's why I came, why I ran. Rest, Tuppence said softly. You're safe now. Safe, Edwin murmured, and this time he seemed to believe it. His breathing slowed, his face smoothed. Sleep claimed him more gently than before. Tommy rose and walked back to the window. The street outside remained quiet, but the air felt charged as though a storm of human intent brewed just beyond sight. Tuppence stood beside him. "She won't sit idle," she said. "Durnell knows we're digging. She'll strike fast." Tommy's jaw tightened. "Then we have to be faster." Tuppence took his hand briefly, warm, grounding, steady. "Tomorrow we retrieve the rest of those ledgers, with Edwin's information. If Durnell wants them hidden, they must be valuable." Tommy nodded slowly. "Harlan's truth is in those archives." "And Edwin's safety depends on what we find," Tuppence added. Behind them, Edwin slept, finally at peace, if only for a moment. Ahead of them, danger sharpened. The lie was unraveling, and the woman who had woven it would soon realize her threads were slipping. The invitation card looked deceptively harmless for the chaos it would soon host. Cream-coloured, embossed with St. Dunstan's crest, it lay on the hall table like a polite afterthought. Tuppence tapped it once with her finger. "A fundraising gala," she mused. "A perfect stage, crowds, applause, a philanthropic tyrant on display." Tommy adjusted his tie, his expression tight, and her guard down. "Ah, my love," Tuppence said with a glint of mischief. "Daphne Durnell spends her life performing. Tonight she'll believe the spotlight protects her, until it doesn't." They left their flat, Edwin wrapped in a scarf and waiting in the care of a neighbour who'd been bribed with a promise of future favours and a tin of Tuppence's just barely edible biscuits. He was still weak, but safe. The night air held the crisp snap of expectation as they arrived at St. Dunstan's Assembly Hall, transformed now into a glittering chamber of polished floors, string quartet melodies, and an array of important faces wearing equally important expressions. Candle-lit sconces glowed along the walls. Silver trays glimmered in the hands of passing waiters. The entire affair smelled faintly of expensive perfume, starched linens, and self-satisfaction. Tuppence surveyed the gathering like a general assessing her battlefield. "Everyone who doesn't matter is here," she murmured. "And everyone who does," Tommy added, spotting several governors, parents, donors, and, at the far end near a podium, the unmistakable figure of Mrs. Daphne Durnell herself. Durnell stood resplendent in a deep burgundy gown that shimmered under the lights. Her hair was arranged in a sculpted wave. Around her neck glinted a brooch shaped like a quill, as though to emphasize her devotion to scholarship. She greeted guests with the careful half-smile of a hostess who curated every detail. Tuppence nudged Tommy. "There she is, draped in virtue like a velvet cloak." Tommy's jaw tensed. "Let's get this done." But Tuppence laid a hand on his arm. "Patience, we need timing, and privacy. Anything too dramatic might spook her accomplice before he shows himself." Tommy frowned. "If there is an accomplice." "Oh, there is," Tuppence said lightly. "Villains rarely do their own administrative work." Just then the string quartet shifted to a triumphant interlude, and the headmaster took the stage with great ceremony. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "thank you for joining us on this magnificent evening to celebrate the longevity of the St. Dunstan's Scholarship Trust." Tuppence arched an eyebrow. "Longevity," she repeated. "There's a word choice." And the headmaster droned on for several minutes about academic excellence, future vision, and the unwavering commitment of the school to fostering bright young minds. Finally, with a flourish, he gestured toward the wing of the stage. "And now, the esteemed keynote speaker, our cherished benefactor and long-standing champion of our scholarship program, Mrs. Daphne Durnell." Soft applause, respectful but not overly enthusiastic, filled the room. Durnell moved with the ease of someone accustomed to spotlights. She stepped to the podium, smiled with perfect poise, and began. "Integrity," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Integrity is the foundation upon which we build our legacy. For decades, the St. Dunstan's Scholarship Trust has upheld this virtue with unyielding devotion. The Trust's purpose is simple: to support the promising futures of our most deserving youth." Tuppence clapped a hand over her mouth, not to hide tears, but to prevent a bark of laughter. Tommy murmured, "Steady." But Tuppence whispered back, "If she uses the word honesty, I might faint." Durnell continued, "The scholarship exists to pave the path for those with potential, for those who embody excellence, for those who believe in service, scholarship, and good conduct." Tuppence leaned toward Tommy. "She's circling like a hawk in rhetorical skywriting." "And waiting for applause," Tommy added. Durnell concluded with a flourish of her hand toward a table displaying framed photographs of past scholarship recipients. Let us continue to embrace the values that make this trust the beacon of hope it has always been. Polite clapping followed. Durnell basked in it with the serene satisfaction of someone who believed their truth had just been carved in marble. Tuppence straightened. "Now," she said. Tommy nodded. They moved deliberately through the crowd, past clusters of guests chattering about funding allocations and impressive exam results. The gallery foyer beyond the hall was quieter, still lit by soft sconces, its marble floor gleaming like polished bone. Durnell stepped into the foyer alone, a moment's retreat from admiration. She stood gazing at a portrait of a former headmaster, a stern gentleman whose eyes seemed to condemn everyone equally. Tuppence approached with crisp steps. "Mrs. Durnell," she said. Durnell turned, surprise flitting across her face. "Mrs. Beresford, Mr. Beresford, what a pleasure. I trust you enjoyed the speech." "Oh, immensely," Tuppence said sweetly. "The part about integrity nearly moved me to tears." Tommy took a step closer. "We need a word, privately." Durnell's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Is this about young Edwin? I do hope he has not exaggerated anything." "Exaggeration," Tuppence repeated, "a fascinating term for forged financial records." Durnell went still. "Forged?" she said coolly. "I beg your pardon." "No," Tuppence interrupted crisply. "You do not beg anything. Let's be plain. You altered scholarship ledgers, you siphoned money, and when Harlan Wade discovered it, you framed him." The silence dropped like a stone. Durnell's pupils tightened. "You've been misled. The boy was unstable, and even if he weren't, that was decades ago. Why drag up ancient—" "Harlan wasn't unstable," Tuppence snapped. "He was brilliant. He noticed discrepancies. He tried to warn the school. He hid evidence in the bell tower because he knew you'd destroy it." Tommy added, voice low with fury, "You ruined his life. You used me to do it." Durnell drew herself up, command thick in her posture. "You were a naive child overhearing things that didn't concern you." "Exactly," Tuppence said. "You manipulated a boy into spreading a lie." "And then Harlan vanished," Tommy added. "Convenient for you." Durnell's expression shifted, not to guilt, but to irritation beginning to crack through composure. "You don't understand," she hissed. "He knew too much. He was always snooping, always questioning authority. A boy like that can destroy reputations." "And yours mattered more than his future," Tuppence said coldly. "That's what you're saying." Durnell's jaw clenched. "I protected the trust. My work, my name. I did what was necessary." Tommy stared at her, breath tightening. "You admit it." "Of course I admit it," Durnell snapped. "Why shouldn't I? Harlan Wade was a threat." A new voice cut through the air like a knife. "No." Tommy and Tuppence turned sharply. Mr. Lyle stepped out from behind a column. The weary caretaker looked suddenly less weary, more solemn, more burdened, and something else, loyal, but twisted by obligation. Durnell stiffened. "Lyle," she said sharply, "you aren't needed here." He ignored her. He looked instead at Tommy and Tuppence. "She's not telling the full story." Durnell rounded on him. "You keep silent. Do you hear me?" But Lyle didn't. His eyes were glassy with regret. "She didn't follow the boy," he said. "I did." Tommy's breath caught. "You?" Lyle nodded heavily. "Mrs. Durnell saved my job years ago. She covered for me when I made a disastrous mistake. I owed her everything. When she asked me to assist with certain matters, I agreed." Tuppence stepped forward, voice soft. "Lyle, what matters?" "The ledgers," he whispered. "I moved them, replaced pages, hid what needed hiding." "And Edwin?" Tommy asked. "He was asking too many questions. I never meant him harm, only to warn him away. When I saw him near the archives last night, I feared he'd found something. I followed him." Durnell's voice slashed through the air. "Lyle, enough!" But the caretaker looked tired of decades of silence. "I won't carry it anymore," he muttered. "I won't." He reached into his coat and pulled out a bundle of papers. Ledgers, pages with familiar scholarship headings. Tuppence gasped. "The originals!" Durnell lunged, but Tommy blocked her. "Lyle," Tuppence said urgently, "give them to us." He held them out. But Durnell wasn't finished. She turned sharply, grabbing a candle from a nearby pedestal. Her hand shook, but her intent was unmistakable. She moved toward the papers. "No!" Tuppence shouted. A sudden movement burst from the side entrance. Edwin, unsteady, breathless, pale as parchment, but standing. "Stop!" he cried, inserting himself between Lyle and Durnell. Durnell faltered. "You!" she spat. "You should have left London." Edwin straightened. "And you should have left Harlan alone." Durnell hesitated just long enough for Tommy to wrench the candle from her hand. She stumbled backward, breath ragged. Tommy glared. "It's over." Durnell's mask cracked entirely now. Fury twisted her features. "You fools!" she hissed. "Harlan didn't die because of me." Silence seized the foyer. Tuppence's voice trembled. "What?" Durnell's eyes glinted. "He fled. A teacher helped him. Put him on a boat. Told him never to return. Because if he did, he'd unravel everything I'd built." Tommy felt the floor tilt beneath him. "He lived?" "For a time, yes. Abroad. Under another name. Pathetic life, really, but he never returned to meddle. He died years ago." The cruelty in her final words broke something inside Tommy. "You destroyed him," he said softly, "even long distance." Lyle looked sick. Durnell looked defiant. Edwin placed a trembling hand on Tommy's arm. "We have everything we need now," he whispered. Tuppence nodded. "Everything." Footsteps sounded behind them. Governors, teachers, attendees drawn by the commotion. Durnell's gaze darted wildly as voices murmured. The stage had shifted. The spotlight was no longer hers. Tuppence stepped forward, voice clear and ringing. "This is the end, Mrs. Durnell." And Durnell, cornered at last, had nothing left to polish. Morning light crept into the Beresfords' sitting room in narrow, hesitant beams, as though unsure it was welcome after the chaos of the previous night. Tommy sat at the dining table, elbows propped, surrounded by a scatter of letters, receipts, and official reports. None of them felt real. They were relics of another boy's life, one he had once known and then unknowingly destroyed. Tuppence placed a cup of tea beside him. "Drink," she said softly. "I'm not thirsty," Tommy replied. "You are," she insisted, "just too heartsick to know it." He managed a faint smile, but didn't touch the cup. His gaze returned to the thin envelope Edwin had delivered moments earlier, an envelope containing the final piece of a story that had been buried for decades. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, a death notice. Harold Wayne, it read, a name so close to Harlan Wade that only someone searching would see the truth. He had died in a small Canadian town of an illness that sounded slow, unkind. "He never came back," Tommy whispered. "No," Tuppence said, taking the chair opposite him. "But that doesn't mean he didn't live." Tommy shook his head. "He lived under another name, far away, alone. He shouldn't have been alone." "He wasn't always alone," Tuppence reminded him gently. "The teacher who helped him, whoever that was, must have cared deeply." Tommy looked down at the death notice. "It says the teacher passed away soon after arriving in Canada." He swallowed. "He saved Harlan, and then died, and Harlan was left with nothing but the lie I helped spread." Tuppence reached across the table and took his hands. "Tommy, you were a boy. You were tricked. All of this would have happened without you. Durnell engineered it. Lyle supported it. You didn't send Harlan away. They did." Tommy clenched his jaw. "But I believed it." "Because you were meant to," she said. "Because that's how lies work. They choose the ears most willing to trust." Tommy's eyes softened. "You always know what to say." "I always know what needs to be said," Tuppence replied. "Not always what you want to hear." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Tuppence rose while Tommy gathered the scattered documents. When she opened the door, Edwin stepped inside, looking steadier than he had since they met him. His colour had returned. His posture, though still nervous, was firmer. "I have it," he said without preamble. "The journal, Harlan's journal." Tommy stood abruptly. "You found it?" Edwin nodded and removed a slim, worn notebook from inside his coat. Hidden at the back of one of the Trust's earliest ledgers, wrapped in wax paper, Mr. Lyle must have missed it during the years he was tidying the archives. Tuppence gestured him inside. "Come sit. Tell us what it says." Edwin handed the journal to Tommy. "I didn't read all of it, but I found several entries written in the week before he left England. They confirm everything. Durnell's manipulation, the forged accounts, his attempt to report it, and this. He produced a slip of folded paper. It fell out when I opened the cover. Tommy took it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Harlan's neat, precise script. If anything happens to me, the truth is here. I only wish my friends understood. Tommy's throat tightened. Friends, he repeated softly, meaning me. Edwin's expression was sympathetic but firm. He didn't blame you, not once. He wrote about you several times. He hoped you'd someday understand. Tuppence squeezed Tommy's shoulder. And now you do. A soft rustle of papers signalled Edwin unfolding another sheet, an official-looking document stamped with the seal of the Metropolitan Police. They're on their way, he said. Inspectors want statements from all of us. They've already spoken to several staff members, and they have Durnell and Lyle held in separate rooms. Tommy inhaled sharply. Durnell will try to talk her way out. She always does. She can try, Edwin said. But we have all the ledgers now, the original ones, and the altered ones. The differences are obvious. The forensic accountants will confirm it. Tuppence's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Confronted with irrefutable math, how poetic, a numbers thief undone by numbers. Edwin managed a small smile. And I think my testimony will help. I saw Lyle moving the books, I saw the missing pages, and I saw the forged entries. Tommy looked at him with quiet gratitude. You've been braver than any of us realized. Edwin lowered his gaze. I didn't feel brave. That's how bravery works, Tuppence said. It rarely feels like itself. A knock came again, this one firmer, official. Tuppence opened the door to reveal Inspector Bishop, flanked by a constable. Mr. and Mrs. Beresford, Bishop said politely. Mr. Price, we'll need your full statements. Mrs. Durnell insists there's been a misunderstanding. Tommy gave a humourless laugh. I'm sure she does. Bishop stepped inside. Before we begin, I must tell you, she's already attempted to accuse Mr. Lyle of orchestrating everything. And Lyle, Tuppence asked, claims loyalty to her, yes, but also admits to helping her manipulate documents. Tommy nodded. Then you'll want to see this. He handed Bishop Harlan's journal, the death notice and the folded note. Bishop skimmed the entries carefully, eyebrows raising higher with every line. This, he said finally, is the most damning piece of evidence I've seen in years, a first-hand account. Edwin added, there are also dates in the journal that match the missing funds exactly. Bishop nodded approvingly. Very well. Mrs. Durnell will have a difficult time contesting this. Good, Tuppence said, smoothing her skirt. She deserves difficulty. Bishop closed the journal. Once your statements are filed, we'll proceed with charges. Fraud, conspiracy, defamation, likely obstruction of justice related to Mr. Wade's disappearance. Tommy swallowed. About Harlan, he lived under another name. Yes, Bishop said gently. We've confirmed it with Canadian authorities. He passed away several years ago. The teacher who helped him died shortly after they arrived. Tommy nodded slowly. Thank you, Inspector. When Bishop and the constable left the room to take statements separately, Tuppence sat beside Tommy again. You're very quiet. Tommy stared at the closed door. There's something unbearably sad about it, Tuppence, that he lived an entire life in the shadow of a lie. Yes, Tuppence said softly, but now the lie is dead, and that matters. Tommy turned to her. You said earlier that lies choose their listeners. They do. Then maybe truth chooses its tellers. Tuppence smiled gently. And you're telling it now. Edwin, who had been standing shyly near the wall, stepped forward. Mr. Beresford, I know tonight must feel like a weight, but Harlan wrote something else. He handed Tommy one final slip from the journal. Tommy unfolded it. I don't hate him. He didn't know. Someday he will, and maybe then he'll forgive himself. Tommy closed his eyes. Tuppence placed her hand over his. He already has. Edwin added softly. And now, others will know too. Footsteps approached. Inspector Bishop reappeared. We're ready for your statements now. Tommy rose. We're ready as well. Tuppence gathered the journal and tucked it under her arm. Let's finish what Harlan started. and as they stepped through the doorway, leaving the sitting room behind, Tommy felt something lift, not the grief, but the burden of silence. The truth had finally found its way home. The days that followed were strangely quiet, not the brittle quiet of danger, but a softer one, like the hush in a room after curtains are drawn and the last guests have finally left. Bloomsbury felt gentler too, its pavements washed clean by a recent street sprinkler carriage, its familiar hum returning after the whirlwind of revelations, arrests, and confessions. Tommy and Tuppence walked side by side down Bedlow Street, their pace unhurried. A bakery window displayed a fresh pyramid of scones. The scent drifted out as they passed, warm and buttery. A newspaper boy shouted headlines about fraud charges and an education scandal. Tommy winced. Tuppence nudged him with her elbow. "You can stop flinching every time the word scholarship appears." "I wasn't flinching," Tommy protested. "You did," she said. Right eye, small twitch, very dignified. He sighed, but allowed a faint smile. The weight he'd carried for so long, decades of murky guilt, half-buried shame and unanswered questions, felt lighter now, though not gone. Truth, it seemed, had a way of loosening chains without quite making them disappear. They passed the park railings where ivy curled around the black bars like green script. A breeze stirred the leaves. Tommy slowed his steps. "Tuppence, may I tell you something? Something I've never quite managed to say aloud." She raised a brow. "You may always tell me things. Whether I listen depends on the quality of the confession." He didn't rise to the bait. "I've spent years believing I ruined a boy's life, that I said something foolish and it snowballed. Part of me never stopped being that 17-year-old idiot." Tuppence softened. "You weren't an idiot. You were a schoolboy fed a lie crafted by an adult with a very flexible moral spine." Tommy swallowed. "Still, I believed it. I didn't question it, and I suppose that frightened me more than anything." "Why?" "Because it made me wonder whether I was capable of cruelty, or cowardice, or carelessness that destroys." She stopped walking, turned to him, and lifted his chin with one finger. "My dear Tommy, if you'd ever been capable of genuine cruelty, I assure you I'd have married someone else." He blinked, startled into laughter. "That's your reassurance?" "Of course. I pride myself on excellent taste." She linked her arm through his. "And I chose you because, even at your most muddled, you're the sort who loses sleep over hurting someone unintentionally. The guilt you felt proves your character far more than the lie ever could." They resumed their walk. A carriage rattled past, and two students hurried by carrying armfuls of books. One dropped a paper, and Tommy instinctively bent to retrieve it before the wind stole it away. "Thank you, sir," the boy called. Tommy smiled at the lad before rejoining Tuppence. "Do you think," he asked, "that Harlan ever forgave me?" Tuppence squeezed his arm. "I think he forgave you long before you forgave yourself. His note said as much." Tommy nodded. Harlan's final lines, "Someday he will understand," echoed gently in his mind. After a few more minutes of companionable silence, they turned onto a quieter street lined with bookshops and small tea rooms. Tommy reached into his coat and pulled out Harlan's journal. Its pages rustled softly as he opened it. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what we might do with the truth we now have." Tuppence tilted her head. "Go on." Harlan deserved more than a life lived in the shadow of someone else's crime. He deserved a future, and since he never returned for it, perhaps someone else should have the chance. A slow, warm smile spread across her face. "You're thinking of a new scholarship." "Yes." He tapped the journal. "A proper one, transparent, accounted for, in his name, the Harlan Wade Memorial Scholarship, for boys or girls with extraordinary potential but no support." "And Edwin?" she asked gently. "I'd like him to help administer it," Tommy said. "He's earned the right to build something good from all this." Tuppence nodded approvingly. "You're choosing truth over regret." Tommy closed the journal with a soft thud. "I'm choosing not to let Durnell's lie be the final word." They reached their favourite bench, a small wrought iron one overlooking a patch of daffodils just beginning to bloom. They sat, shoulders touching. After a moment, Tuppence said, "You know, I've always believed that lies shape us, but truth restores us." Tommy exhaled, long and steady. "Then this is the truth I choose." A comfortable quiet settled between them. A pair of schoolchildren chased each other across the green. A woman fed crumbs to the pigeons. Life, steady and ordinary, moved on. Tommy slipped the journal back into his coat pocket. "Tuppence," he said. "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For being the person who makes truth bearable." She leaned her head briefly against his shoulder. That's what partners do. And as they sat together in the Bloomsbury morning, warmed by companionship and softened by the promise of new beginnings, Tommy felt, for the first time in decades, that the past no longer owned him. A lie had shaped him, but truth at last restored him.